I recently got this Pokeball tin which I think looks amazing. I've also recently been enjoying using this ResinCrete, so I wanted to give it another go. I'm going to be attempting to make Pokeball coasters and try out a new technique with the ResinCrete. So my plan is to layer the ResinCrete and create this Pokeball, starting with the white button and then the black line and then the large red and white sections, before topping off any extra with some plain ResinCrete. I mix a small amount up for the first layer and wait 30 minutes for it to set. I can tell that it's definitely ready as the leftovers in the mixing cup have already set. I then mix up the next batch for adding the black details. I use a combination of black liquid pigment and this powdered pigment, and eventually I managed to get something that looks black and not just very dark grey. Previously when I used ResinCrete I found it pretty hard to get a vivid bold colour, so I went really heavy on the pigments this time around. With that in mind, the red took a while to actually get red and not pink, and I even scraped the pigment that had solidified slightly in the mini bottles and was happy with the end colour. The red did end up looking a bit weird and it ended up having air pockets in it, but I thought that they would settle to the top and then get filled in by later layers. Let me know in the comments if you know how to avoid this next time. I then mixed up some plain ResinCrete that dries white, so no need to add any extra pigments here, and poured the final part of the Pokeball design. And as usual, I underestimated how much to mix to fill up the remainder of the moulds, and ended up mixing a few more batches before the coasters were done. After another 30 minutes, it was time to demould. I was hoping that these wouldn't require sanding, but my optimism was cut down when I saw how uneven the coasters were. I got out the sanding paper attached to a mirror that worked super well for my previous coasters and started sanding. In the back of my mind, I did worry that my details were too thin and would just sand off, and this ended up being the case. You can see here the white backing showing through the black lines. It also ended up revealing the air pockets that I thought I'd filled in, and some of the pockets even looked sort of yellow or gold in a certain light. This led me to think that it had something to do with the red pigment that I'd scraped out from the bottle. Maybe I just didn't mix it in well enough before pouring. I tried using a small piece of sandpaper to sand away just the untidy parts, but it really didn't work. Anyway, the sanding left me feeling pretty disappointed with how these coasters turned out. The middle white button was usually quite sunken in, and to sand it flat would mean sanding off the rest of the details. I decided that it was not worth sanding the coasters and tried to think of an alternate way to tidy these up. I really didn't have many ideas, so I ended up deciding to just paint over them. Some of them I just tidied up with paint and others I completely covered. I was a little sad as this painting made the original design feel pretty much pointless, and I may have ended up with a better result if I just poured plain ResinCrete coasters and then painted the design on. I decided to seal them with plain old PVA glue, and here is the final result. You can definitely tell where they were painted, but at least I ended up with something. If you have any hints or tips about how I could produce Pokeball ResinCrete coasters, I would really appreciate it if you could leave a comment with your advice. Maybe next time I would make the designs the right way up with the design on top and see if that works. I also need help with how to clean the pigments off these silicone moulds. I've scrubbed them with soapy water, but the design is just stuck. I don't want to use any harsh chemicals as it might degrade the silicone, and so any tips would be greatly appreciated. Thank you for watching, especially if you made it to the end. I do like to show crafts that don't always go to plan, but this is definitely one I want to try again. Hopefully with some of your help I'll get a much better result next time.